She entered the world on a warm June day in 1926, beneath a sky that looked brighter than her mother's troubled eyes. Her name was Norma Jeane Mortensen, though no one in her early life seemed certain of what her last name truly should be. That uncertainty, small, almost invisible, became the first shadow in a life destined to be lit by brilliance and haunted by doubt. Her mother, Gladys, carried dreams that were fragile even before the world shattered them. She worked long hours at a Hollywood film lab, splicing together scenes from movies she would never fully watch, scenes filled with beautiful actresses whose lives seemed perfect. At night she would come home exhausted, her mind flickering between hope and the storms that lived inside her. Norma Jeane learned early that her mother loved her, but that love was often swallowed by the chaos in Gladys's thoughts. Their little apartment had sunlight during the day and loneliness at night. Sometimes Gladys would sit at the small kitchen table, tracing her finger along photographs of Norma Jeane's father, the man who left before he ever held his daughter. Other nights she would be cheerful, humming while brushing Norma Jeane's hair. The tenderness never lasted long, but it was enough for the girl to hold on to as proof that love existed. Hollywood was close enough to smell its perfumes, but far enough to never touch. Norma Jeane would watch glamorous actresses rush past on the street below, their heels clicking like they were marching into a world she wasn't allowed to enter. She didn't know their names, but she knew their faces. Faces full of attention, faces no one forgot. She wondered what it felt like to be looked at like that. But childhood is rarely patient with dreams. One evening, Gladys collapsed under the weight of her own thoughts. Neighbours came, voices filled the room, and Norma Jeane stood silently clutching a small stuffed animal. She didn't fully understand what was happening, only that her mother's eyes looked different, distant, frightened, unreachable. That night, the little girl was taken away and placed in the first of many temporary homes. The world became a rotating door of strangers. Some families were kind, offering warm meals and gentle words. Others were cold, strict, or indifferent. Norma Jeane learned to pack quickly, to smile politely, to never ask for more than she was given. She grew used to sleeping in unfamiliar rooms, staring at ceilings that did not belong to her. She discovered early how to survive through silence. Yet the spark inside her never dimmed. She read books, practiced her handwriting, and helped with chores. She imagined herself as a character in a fairy tale, someone who would one day be rescued, someone who would one day be loved without conditions. She dreamed about her mother coming back, healthy and smiling, declaring that everything would finally be okay. It never happened. Despite the loneliness, people noticed her gentle presence. She had a softness that made adults speak kindly and children feel comfortable. There was something about her smile, sincere, hopeful, a little shy, that made even bad days feel slightly warmer. She learned to use that smile like a small lantern in the dark. But society had little mercy for a girl without a home. Orphanages waited whenever a family could no longer keep her. Each time she entered one, she felt smaller, like a leaf drifting wherever the wind decided. When she turned 16, she faced the prospect of being returned once again. That was when the idea of marriage appeared. Not from love, not from romance, but from practicality. A neighbour's son, James Doherty, offered stability, a home, a guarantee she would not be placed back into the system. Their wedding was quiet, simple, arranged in a way adults believed was best for her. Norma Jeane wore a borrowed dress and tried to feel happy. She tried to believe that this new chapter would bring the warmth she'd chased her whole life. But as the months passed, she realised she'd traded one cage for another. James was not unkind, just unaware. He saw her as a wife in the traditional sense, someone to manage the home, prepare dinner, wait for him. He loved her politely but without depth, without understanding the stories behind her quiet eyes. She wanted to tell him she wanted more, but she didn't know how. She barely knew how to ask the world for anything. When James left military service, the house became too quiet, too large. Norma Jeane found work at a munitions factory, assembling parts for airplanes. It was loud, oily, filled with clattering machinery and shouting supervisors. But for the first time, she felt useful. She felt like she was contributing to something greater, and for a girl who had once been made to feel invisible, that meant everything. One afternoon, the factory received visitors, a photography unit tasked with documenting women in the workforce. The photographer, a man with a patient smile, noticed her immediately. Not because she posed, not because she tried to impress, but because she looked radiant even while doing the simplest tasks. Her smile, her eyes, the natural grace she carried, it was all effortless. He asked to photograph her. She hesitated, confused, then agreed. Those photographs became her first whisper of destiny. They appeared in magazines, catching the attention of modelling agencies. Suddenly, people wanted to meet her. They called her beautiful. They called her special. They called her photogenic, charming, remarkable. No one had ever used words like that for her before. And as the world began to notice her, something shifted inside her. For the first time, the girl who'd spent her childhood waiting for a place to belong began to imagine that maybe, just maybe, she could carve one for herself. The name Marilyn Monroe had not yet been spoken aloud, but the light that would define her future had already begun to flicker, bright and fragile, inside the girl who'd once been lost but was now, finally, being seen. When Norma Jeane stepped into her first modelling studio, the air felt different, brighter, warmer, full of the kind of attention she had never known. Photographers moved around her, adjusting lights, discussing angles, praising the softness of her expression. She tried to hide her nerves, though her hands trembled just slightly each time she touched her hair. Yet the camera loved her instantly. She didn't have to pose dramatically or pretend to be confident. Her natural shyness seemed to create a glow all on its own. Photographers said she had it, the rare ability to look like she belonged in every frame. And for the first time, she felt like the world didn't just look through her, it actually saw her. Modelling brought opportunities quickly. Magazines offered spreads, agencies offered contracts. Each day she learned something new: how to hold her shoulders, where to direct her gaze, how to use her smile like it was a key that unlocked doors. She never thought of herself as beautiful, not truly, but the world insisted she was. Still, with every success, she felt the distance growing between her and the life she had known. When James, her husband, returned home on military leave, he was surprised to see the photographs of her in shop windows and newspapers. He didn't recognize the woman staring back, confident, glamorous, luminous. He told her gently that he preferred the quiet, simple girl he had married. But that girl was disappearing, piece by piece, replaced by someone who stood straighter, spoke more boldly, and dreamed far beyond the walls of their small home. And though Norma Jeane tried to be both, the obedient wife and the blossoming star, she felt herself being pulled toward a future she could no longer ignore. Their marriage, built on necessity rather than shared dreams, began to dissolve like a photograph left too long in the sun. By the time she signed her first movie contract with 20th Century Fox, she knew that a new identity was being shaped for her. Studio executives discussed her like she was a project, an unfinished sculpture. Her hair needed to be lighter. Her name needed to be stronger. Her image needed to be unforgettable. She sat in a room full of men deciding her fate, her future, even the sound of her name. One suggested Marilyn, smooth, glamorous, memorable. Another added Monroe, taken from her mother's maiden name. Norma Jeane repeated it softly under her breath. Marilyn Monroe. The words sparkled, but they also echoed, hollow and unfamiliar. Still, she smiled. She had been waiting her whole life to be chosen, and now she was. Hollywood welcomed Marilyn Monroe with dazzling lights and impossible expectations. She learned how to walk the way the studio wanted, how to laugh the way audiences loved, how to tilt her head just slightly to make her eyes shimmer on screen. She practiced lines until dawn, terrified of making a mistake, terrified of being sent back to the life she had fought so hard to escape. She soon discovered that fame was a strange kind of companion, warm at first, then unpredictable, then hungry. Her early movie roles were small, but her presence was anything but. Even in brief appearances, audiences leaned forward when she walked into a scene. She radiated innocence wrapped in allure, a combination Hollywood found irresistible. Producers whispered about her, directors argued over her, reporters asked about her like she was a new phenomenon. And slowly, the world fell in love with the woman they believed Marilyn Monroe to be. But inside, she was still Norma Jeane, a young woman who struggled with insecurity, who battled the tremors of her past, who feared abandonment more than anything. She could make millions laugh with a single line, yet she often cried quietly in her dressing room, wondering if she was truly worthy of the affection being showered upon her. Her marriage to James finally ended, gently but inevitably, as their worlds drifted too far apart to ever reunite. She walked away without bitterness, only a quiet sadness, knowing that she was stepping fully into a life that would offer fame but demand sacrifices. Hollywood became her new home, though she never quite felt at home there. The studio system controlled everything: her schedule, her appearance, her public statements. They gave her glamorous dresses but not creative freedom. They taught her how to sparkle but not how to rest. They adored her image but rarely listened to her voice. Still, Marilyn persisted, she took acting lessons seriously, studying late into the night, determined to prove that she was more than a pretty face. She devoured books, novels, poetry, history, anything that gave her a sense of depth beyond the blonde bombshell persona crafted for her. She wanted to be seen for her mind as much as her smile. Her career soared. Films like Niagara, Gentlemen Prefer Blondes, and How to Marry a Millionaire turned her into a global icon. Her comedic timing sparkled. Her charm felt effortless. Crowds gathered wherever she went, screaming her name, reaching for her hands. But the brighter she shone, the larger the shadows behind her grew. Fame brought isolation. Every friend she made had expectations attached. Every gesture she offered was interpreted as something more. She could never simply walk down the street or sit in a cafe without becoming a spectacle. Cameras followed her. Journalists invented stories about her. Fans demanded pieces of her life like souvenirs. And yet, beneath the glitter she remained gentle, a softness the world rarely noticed. Then came Joe DiMaggio. He was a baseball legend, confident yet quiet, adored by millions but seemingly untouched by the flashier corners of fame. Marilyn admired his calmness. Joe admired her warmth and vulnerability. Their chemistry was immediate, their affection genuine. For a moment she felt she'd found a safe place, someone who could see both the star and the girl she once was. But their worlds were too different. Joe wanted a traditional wife. Marilyn was becoming an independent, unstoppable force. His jealousy clashed with her rising fame. His need for privacy collided with her public image. They loved each other deeply, but love alone was not enough. The marriage, passionate but turbulent, began to fracture under the crushing weight of attention and expectation. Marilyn threw herself back into her work, determined to carve her own path. She joined the prestigious Actors Studio in New York, seeking respect, growth, and authenticity. She was terrified to walk into a room filled with serious, trained actors, but she forced herself to stand tall. There, for the first time in her career, she was not treated as a pin-up girl or a studio product. She was treated as a student, an actress in progress, and she blossomed. But even as she improved, even as critics began to admire her depth, she felt something fragile inside her starting to crack. She was giving so much to the world, yet receiving so little in return. Her smile remained bright. Her image remained flawless. But the woman behind the image was growing tired, yearning for a place where she could simply be herself. And slowly she began to sense that fame, like a spotlight, could warm you, but it could also blind you. By the late 1950s and early 1960s, Marilyn Monroe had become a phenomenon, an image etched into billboards, magazines, theatre marquees, and the hearts of millions. She was no longer simply a movie star. She was an idea, a dream, a symbol of beauty, charm, vulnerability, and hope. Yet the more she became a symbol, the more she felt the quiet aches of becoming invisible inside her own life. Fame had brought her all the glittering things she once thought meant happiness, admiration, success, applause, the kind of attention she'd longed for as a lonely child. But what she discovered, slowly, painfully, was that the world's love was scattered like confetti. It sparkled brilliantly but disappeared the moment the lights dimmed. Behind the scenes, she struggled with exhaustion, pressure, and the weight of expectations placed upon her shoulders. Studios demanded constant perfection. Directors expected her to shine even when she felt too tired to lift her head. Fans adored her, but rarely paused long enough to wonder how she felt beneath the glow. Marilyn's days often swung between intense filming schedules, interviews, rehearsals, and endless publicity events. There were moments of triumph, scenes she delivered with breathtaking emotional depth, nights when applause filled entire theatres, mornings when critics praised her in ways she once believed impossible. She held onto those moments like pieces of sunlight. But there were also quiet hours, too quiet, when the world around her felt overwhelmingly large, and she felt overwhelmingly small. She sought ways to find balance. She read constantly, losing herself in novels and poetry. Books became a safe place where no one judged her. No one demanded anything from her. She filled notebooks with her thoughts, small confessions, dreams, fears she could tell no one else. Her handwriting flowed softly across each page, honest and intimate. She filled her home with candles, soft lights, flowers, and beloved animals that offered the comfort only unconditional affection could provide. She loved small, peaceful things, Warm baths, gentle music, quiet evenings, thoughtful conversations. She longed not for more fame, but for more calm. During these years, she also experienced bonds that shaped her deeply. Friendships, collaborations, fragile romances. Each one carried its own warmth and its own challenges. Some people saw her clearly, others saw only the shimmering figure the world had created. She often found herself caught between wanting to be loved and fearing she might be misunderstood yet again. Her work remained a source of both pride and strain. She pushed herself tirelessly, determined to evolve as an artist. She studied acting with intensity, dissected scripts with a seriousness that surprised even seasoned professionals, and fought for roles that allowed her to show not just glamour but humanity. In 1961, she starred in The Misfits, a film that demanded emotional sincerity rather than comedy or seduction. Working alongside writers and actors who respected her inner world, Marilyn delivered a performance that was raw, heartfelt, and unforgettable. The film became a mirror, not only for the audience but for Marilyn herself. She saw reflected in it the woman she had always wanted to be taken seriously, thoughtful, expressive, capable of depth. But pushing her emotions so far left her drained. She moved through the year with both hope and heaviness, trying to balance the expectations of an entire industry with the simple need to breathe, rest, and recover. Even as she sought peace, the outside world continued to press against her. Rumours, headlines, speculation. Her life became the subject of constant public imagination. People wrote stories about her that she didn't recognise. Newspapers described her as fragile, difficult, unpredictable, when in truth she was trying her best to stay steady in a world that refused to slow down. Still, throughout all the storms, she kept looking forward. She discussed future film projects, new beginnings, creative plans that excited her. She spoke about wanting a stable home, a life with genuine connection, a future where she could be both Marilyn and Norma Jeane without tearing herself in half. She dreamed of kindness, warmth, and a love that felt like shelter rather than expectation. Her final summer was filled with both work and rest, quiet moments mixed with flashes of public attention. She wrote letters, made calls, planned meetings, arranged her home, and surrounded herself with simple comforts. She looked toward tomorrow with a mixture of uncertainty and fragile optimism. Then, one August morning in 1962, the world awoke to the news that Marilyn Monroe was gone. Her passing came quietly, without spectacle, without dramatic scenes, without the glow of cameras or applause. It was a moment of stillness in her life that had rarely been still. The world reacted with shock, sorrow, disbelief. People mourned not just the star, but the woman they felt they had known, the woman who had made them laugh, dream, hope. But more than anything, people mourned the gentleness behind her smile, the humanity behind the legend. In the days that followed, newspapers wrote thousands of words about who she'd been. Some focused on glamour, others focused on tragedy. But the truth of her life was far more delicate. She'd been a woman who carried both light and loneliness, radiance and vulnerability. She'd given the world joy even on days when she struggled to find joy for herself. And though her life ended far too soon, something of her essence remained, something warm, tender, unforgettable. Her films continued to shine, her voice continued to echo, her presence continued to linger in the corners of culture, fashion, art, and imagination. People saw her not merely as a star, but as a reminder of the complexity behind every human face. Over time, the world learned to see her more clearly, not just as Marilyn, the bright icon, but also as Norma Jeane, the girl with dreams bigger than the circumstances she was born into, a girl who wanted to be loved, a woman who wanted to be understood, a heart that wanted to rest. And so she became eternal, not because of her fame, but because of her humanity. Marilyn Monroe's light never truly faded. It softened, it transformed. It became a quiet glow, one that still touches people, still inspires artists, still whispers to anyone who has ever felt unseen. A reminder that behind every legend stands a human being. A reminder that gentleness is a kind of strength. A reminder that even the brightest stars need a place where they can simply exist. And in remembering her, the world finally learned to look beyond the spotlight, into the heart that had always been there, shining softly in both light and shadow.